Welcome in to another PFF College Football Show preview show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton and Wasserman previewing and predicting the biggest games of Week 10 of college football. And Dalton, officially, we're going to be in the month of November, the final month of the college football regular season. So it's the final few weeks for schools to pad their resumes for the 12-team college football playoff. And because of that, we've got 9 pivotal games for that playoff race that I can't wait to get into today.
Yeah, you know, I think we came into the week thinking we'd have less than that, but there's so many games that just matter to the playoff race, and there's so many huge games. So, you know, we're getting into the point of the season where there's going to be some elimination games going. Yep. I think at least kind of on paper is what they look like, and now teams are trying to pad their resumes with good wins and avoid bad losses and just see where it goes, especially in the conference standings, getting in conference title games. We're really hitting the home stretch now.
Absolutely. So before we get into our previews, let's start off with our records for the season so far. And Dawn, you now have a 2-game lead on me. You are 41-21 on the season. I am 39-23 on the season. You were able to pull away from me after having, I think you hit one of the ones that I didn't hit last week. Well, I forgot which one. Boise State, right. Yep. I picked UNLV, and I was dead wrong about that. So should never doubted Ashton Ginty, and now because of that, you have a 2-game lead on me going to Week 10.
Yeah, no, that was a fun game, too. I mean, we're going to have a real fun Group of 5 race getting there, but Boise State right now looks like the favorite for that spot as long as they keep rolling.
Absolutely. So let's get into the biggest game of the weekend and one of the biggest games of the college football season. And Dalton, we will be making the road trip to Happy Valley to be in attendance because me as a lifelong Penn State fan, there was no way I was missing Ohio State, Penn State, number 4 Ohio State at number 3 Penn State, noon Eastern time on Fox. I personally can't wait to get down to Happy Valley. We're driving down on Friday. It was like a 6.5-hour road trip that we're going to do.
There, yeah.
So we're meeting up my dad and my uncle, so I'm excited for you to meet those guys. It'll be a lot of fun. And then we're driving right back after the game's over. You got to be back for our Sunday review show, obviously. So can't wait for that one. Top 5 matchup between these two schools. And the storylines to know at least is the health of Drew Aller, because the Nittany Lions do. This is their biggest game of the season. They have a question mark on who will be under center for them because Drew Aller injured his left knee in the win over Wisconsin this past Saturday and didn't return in the game. And head coach James Franklin said recently in his press conference that he expects Aller to be a game-time decision on Saturday. If he's unable to go, then Bo Perbula will start for Penn State. The redshirt sophomore was inspiring in relief of Aller on Saturday. He had an 87.9 passing grade against Wisconsin and completed nearly 85% of his attempts. But even with that, even as inspiring as Bo Perbula was, the Nittany Lions' chances of winning this game probably hinges on whether or not their star quarterback is able to go.
Yeah, and I think, look, Bo did a really good job in the second half against Wisconsin, and part of this is evaluation. I think there is a true evaluation going on right now about whether or not Drew Aller can play, but Andy Kotelnicki was prepared with Bo Perbula. That's 2 very different offenses that these 2 guys can run. So I think there is a part of this that's a little bit of gamesmanship. It's going to stay a game-time decision, and we may not know until the opening snap because they're 2 very different quarterbacks with different skill sets. And if Aller is not 100%, look, after this Ohio State game, Penn State still has a very clear road to 11-1 into the playoff, right? Even if they're not going to win the conference, I think they're going to be looking short and long-term at Drew Aller's health here and as far as just how the remainder of their season can go. Because I think they're a team that even if they don't win the conference, they could get in one of those first 4 home playoff spots in the 5 through 8 slots in the playoffs. So I think they're going to really evaluate this beyond just this week. But if Drew can go, they're going to let him go.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point that you just made right there, because in past years in a 4-team playoff era, it'd be like, hey, we need Aller out there. We need him out there because if we lose this game, we're not making the playoffs. So we desperately need to get him out there no matter what. Now, if you're Penn State, yes, you still want him out there for the biggest game of the year. But you could also think long-term, like, hey, if there's a really good chance he re-injures that knee if we put him out there, maybe let's not. Like, maybe, I'm not saying wave the white flag or anything like that, but maybe say, hey, it's a long season. Like you said, 11-1 still gets you in the playoff. So Penn State could be thinking about that long-term as well. So it'd be interesting. Game time decision. Jesus.
There you go.
But Bo Perbula, I would think Aller's going to play. He's from Ohio. Ohio State was recruiting him a lot. I'm sure he's got a lot of family members and friends that went to Ohio State. He probably is like, no, I'm playing in this game. So I'm not, again, I have no inside info, but I would be pretty surprised if we are there in Happy Valley and Drew Aller is not the quarterback for Penn State. So we will see. I think he actually took off the knee brace after the game was over, which is good sign, at least, against Wisconsin. So we'll see what happens there. Dalton, you actually have the Penn State offense, though. So whether it be Aller or Perbula under center for Nittany Lions, what should we be looking out for when they have the ball?
Yeah, what I kind of want to see, regardless of which quarterback is in there, and this isn't necessarily a matchup thing or anything like that, Penn State's had a habit of getting off to slow starts in these games, especially offensively, and it feels like they kind of use almost like the first round in a boxing match where you just kind of throwing jabs and feeling out where the rest of the game should go right now. Penn State, they're 7th in the FBS in offensive grade, but when you talk about the first quarter of these games, they're 30th in offensive grade, which is still obviously very good when you talk about out of 130-something teams, but it's just not quite on an explosive level, right? 30th in offensive grade, 50th in EPA per play, whereas the rest of the game, they're 7th in offensive grade and 5th in EPA per play, and that's much more representative of how their offense has mostly played this year. But they've only scored 24 points in 7 first quarters this season, and just 3 points in their last 3 games together in the first quarter. So it just seems to be this habit they have. I don't know if it's a habit of being mentally ready to play, or if I think there is some conservative play calling that is kind of involved here. They're just kind of trying to feel it out, find the rhythm, find what formations, what shifts are working, and what defenses are giving them, right? So I think I look at the passing game especially, okay? For the rest of the games after the first quarter, Penn State has a 10.1 yard average depth of target, right? We're getting downfield, we're attacking vertically. In the first quarter, that's just 6.2 yards on an average depth of target. It's just, you can feel it is more conservative, and that 6.2 yards, that's the 12th lowest mark in the country in the first quarter of games. They've only attempted 1 deep pass the entire year in the first quarter. I just have to wonder, against an Ohio State team, their defense has been much better in the first half of these games. In the first half of games, Ohio State has the highest graded defense in the country. We know they're really good. They got star power all over the place. Jack Sawyer, Tyleik Williams, Caleb Downs. They have a million superstars, but they get off to good starts and they establish their dominance in these games. And Penn State doesn't do that offensively. So I'm curious to see if Penn State, if it's going to be the same thing and they're just going to try to establish the run and easy throws and get in a rhythm and then figure it out as the game goes on. The halftime adjustments, they've been great on both sides of the ball. Or do they maybe come out, even if it is Bo, and just now this is the game where they break the tendency, right? And you come out, maybe you take a shot in the first play of the game instead of just, throwing a slant or throwing a screen or just handing the ball off. It just feels like it takes them a minute to get the engine running, and I want to see. I actually want to see maybe, just maybe, if this is the week where Andy Kotelnicki goes, let's take an early shot and let's try to get an early 7-0 lead and then let the defense play.
And another thing about that too is I kind of love if it is Bo out there, first play, even Aller out there, take a shot. Like I remember last year when Utah played Florida and Cam Rising was out for that game, and we're like, okay, Utah, man, got to run the ball the entire game.
Nate Johnson, right?
Yeah. Or no, was it Ray Johnson or Bryson Barnes?
I thought it was Johnson.
It might have been Nate Johnson. I think you're right. And then first play of the game, they're like, nope, we're taking a shot. Bam, 70-yard touchdown. Like, oh boy, like that is not at all what we thought. So I think that could be a really, really fun thing to do if they do that as well. Are You Yeti in the chat actually made a great point on not only Drew Aller from Ohio, Will Howard has said in press conferences he grew up a Penn State fan and wanted to go to Penn State, never got an offer from Penn State, and he said in the press conference, like, all right, now I'm going to try to show them that I was worth a scholarship offer. So both these guys, obviously Aller, I think, got an offer from Ohio State. Obviously, he's a 5-star recruit. Howard did not get one. So these are two guys kind of going against like the schools that they grew up at least watching and loving at least. So my side of the ball, though, is Will Howard. And really, it's not even about him. It's about the offensive line. Because Ohio State's offensive line has been completely rebuilt right now because they suffered a couple weeks ago against Oregon. Star left tackle, projected top 50 pick in the NFL draft, Josh Simmons, suffered a season-ending knee injury. His replacement, Zen Mikulski, really struggled in relief of him. He had a 15.6 pass blocking grade across the last 2 games against Oregon and against Nebraska. That was the 7th worst among FBS tackles in that stretch. Then Mikulski was carted off in the win over Nebraska, which obviously we haven't gotten an official word on him yet, but his availability for Saturday is very, very much in doubt. So what they've done since then, they moved their star left guard, Donovan Jackson, out to left tackle, and they put sophomore Luke Montgomery in at left guard. So you lose your superstar left tackle, then your backup left tackle goes down. Now your left guard kicks out to left tackle, and now you have a new left guard in there. The whole left side of the offensive line for Ohio State is in complete disarray right now due to injuries. If Donovan Jackson is indeed the left tackle, really good offensive lineman, really strong player, But obviously, as a guard kicking out the tackle, there's an issue with speed there. That could be an issue against Abdul Carter and against Dennis Sutton, who Dennis Sutton as well. He is questionable because he suffered an injury against Wisconsin as well, so we don't know if he'll be out there. Abdul Carter, though, we do know will be out there. And Penn State's defense this year, Dawn, is 9th in pass rush win rate at 47%, and they're one of the 15 best in America in pass rushing grade at 80.4 and pressure rate at 38.3%. And speaking of Will Howard, he is the 6th worst passing grade under pressure this year at 28.4. So if you get Will Howard under pressure, and Penn State's got a really good pass rush against a completely rebuilt offensive line that's really just banged up right now, that could spell a lot of trouble for this Ohio State offense. And especially if you give Will Howard time, if they do perform well, then you got Jeremiah Smith, you got Emeka Egbuka, you got Carnell Tate, all those weapons. Penn State's got a good secondary. I don't know if any secondary in the country can handle those weapons if you give Will Howard time back there. So they got to get after Will Howard. And then also, another concerning trend for Ohio State that we talked about before, Ohio State's run game over the last 2 games has not been good either. Like Quinshon Judkins has been held, I think, below 30 yards in each of the last 2 games when he's been one of the best running backs in America his whole career. Trayvon Henderson as well has not done too well either. So Penn State, 17th in run defense grade. So you got a dominant front 7 in both pass rushing and run defense, a rebuilt offensive line, a banged-up offensive line, and a run game that's really struggling, and a quarterback who struggles immensely under pressure. That's a big issue if this offensive line does not hold up against Penn State.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned out on the edge if Donovan Jackson's going to play left tackle, but then you mentioned a backup left guard too now, and those big guys in the middle like Zane Durant are not easy to block either. Look, it's hard enough to block Penn State when your offensive line is fully healthy, right? They're one of the best pass rushers, one of the best units in America. Now you're talking about they're shorthanded up front, and it was already hard enough to block them. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a real battle in the trenches on both sides of the ball, but this one especially is going to be the one to watch because I don't think Ohio State, honestly, up front played all that well against Nebraska last week. It wasn't great. The run blocking was okay, but it's been a struggle lately for Ohio State up front. Their O-line has not played at an elite level, and now they're banged up.
Yeah, I think they had like a sub-50 pass blocking grade against them, and they weren't great in the Oregon game either with Josh Simmons going down with an injury. So that's a big issue against a dominant Penn State defensive line. And if Dennis Sutton is healthy and he's out there, that's an even bigger issue for them. Dawn, ultimately, for the game that we'll be in attendance for, are you going to break my heart and my family's hearts that you're going to meet and we're going to house you, we're going to feed you? Are you going to break their hearts and pick Ohio State, or will you be an honorary Chadwick this week and pick the Nittany Lions to win?
Obviously, with it being the biggest game of the week, I think especially the Drew Aller injury makes it an even harder game to pick. And I think the margin one way or the other is going to be incredibly narrow. I think it's going to be a low-scoring defensive game. Because of Aller, the questions with Aller, and I think a big thing is I'm a little bit worried too about this Penn State offensive line. They're a decent unit, they're not a great unit, and they're not a great run blocking unit. Sometimes they take a while to get in rhythm. I'm a little worried that Ohio State's defense might just kind of outdo Penn State's defense just a little bit here, and at least with Ohio State, you still have Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka on the outside who can make enough plays. I think this game comes down to probably turnovers, and if one defense can force the other into mistakes, and if there is an early explosive play from one way or the other for a team to gain the early momentum. But I think it's a classic defensive Big Ten game, but I have Ohio State 19-16.
Okay. All right, breaking my heart, Dawn. At the risk of being called a homer, I'm picking Penn State, 24-23. Really, it hinges on Drew Aller's health. I agree with you. If he's out of this game or even not close to 100%, I think Ohio State's winning this game. But if he's good to go, I think Penn State will win in a close one because of his defensive line having a significant advantage over Ohio State's offensive line. And if you get Will Howard under pressure and you shut down those running backs, it could be a long day for that Ohio State offense. I agree with you. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game either way. But I do think Penn State, for the first time since, I think, 2016, I believe, I think Penn State will pull it off and beat Ohio State. So first time in 8 years, I think that'll happen. And we'll see what happens in Happy Valley in what should be the biggest game of the weekend and one of the biggest games of the entire season. Next up we're talking about is another really good noon game, Duke at number 5, Miami. It's on ABC. Really, Dalton, this is Miami's most difficult game the rest of the season. Right now, the Hurricanes are 8-0. They're ranked in the top 5 for the first time in 7 years. But that perfect record hasn't come without some close calls. They had games against Virginia Tech, Cal, and Louisville that all went down to the wire and were all decided by one possession. Those three are three of the four teams Miami's played this year that are inside the top 45 of PFF's power rankings. The other one was Florida in that week 1 game where they blew out Florida. Duke is 30th in PFF's power ranking right now, making them easily the highest ranked team Miami has left on its regular season schedule. And the Blue Devils are having a great year of their own. They're 6-2 for the first time in 9 years, in year 1 under Manny Diaz as head coach. So this is Miami's probably most difficult game the rest of the year.
Yeah, I would agree, especially with what Manny Diaz is doing on defense. And even at a loss to SMU last week, we saw how good his defense is, right? He's brought that same mentality, that aggressive mentality he had at Penn State before that and all his other stops, and they forced 6 turnovers last week. So I think Miami has to be very careful here. Because Duke, they have a certain style that they play. They know who they are. Do they always score the most points in the world? No, but they absolutely know what they want to do. So this can be, for a gunslinger like Cam Ward, this could be a problem against this Duke defense.
Absolutely. So go into that a little bit more, Dalton. So you have the Miami offense in this game. So when Cam Ward, one of the Heisman Trophy favorites right now, goes up against that stingy Duke defense, what should we be looking out for?
So definitely we've seen this season where there have been moments, maybe not as consistently as his prior seasons, where Cam Ward can still kind of put the ball in danger a little bit, right? We saw it against Virginia Tech. We saw it against Cal. We only saw one bad throw. I think it was against Cal. There was a real bad pick six, but we didn't see many bad throws when he played Louisville, but Louisville's got a struggling secondary. Duke's a different animal on defense. Manny Diaz has them rolling 4th best coverage grade in the entire nation right now. And you look at what they are doing to cause quarterbacks problems, okay? They have forced quarterbacks into 21 turnover-worthy plays this year. They lead the Power 5 with 19 takeaways, and they blitz at one of the highest rates in the country right there on pass plays. Look, I think the biggest matchup for me in this game is if Duke can get Miami into long situations. And we know Cam Ward's been really good on 3rd down when you give him time, but against the blitz, he's at least been human, right? It's a little bit lighter against the blitz. He gets rid of the ball quicker, knowing he's got to beat the blitz with his arm. We saw him against Louisville. When they were sending only 3 or 4, he was buying time all day. When Cam Ward gets to improvise and break the pocket and find guys downfield, that's when he gets really, really fun. But when teams have been blitzing him, then he goes with the hot reads, right? He goes with the shorter throws. He's not killing you downfield. So he hasn't necessarily been bad against the blitz. He's just been human. I think the thing for me with Manny Diaz that makes him unique with his blitzes is the amount and the types of zone blitzes that he runs, right? Because if you zero blitz Cam Ward, there's too many guys out there one-on-one. Somebody's going to win. Probably Xavier Restrepo. Somebody's going to win. Or man coverage, if it's protected right, Ward's just going to take off and run. I think zone blitzes, even though he hasn't seen a ton of them this year, you can see Cam Ward being just a little bit more bothered. I'm not saying at all that this is the thing that, this is for sure. Duke's going to win the game like this. This is kryptonite. Not at all, because Cam Ward, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. But I think you have a thing where it's at least a window, and Duke runs the 2nd most zone blitzes of any team in the country. Manny Diaz, as long as they can get in good down and distance situations for his defense, I think the zone blitzing is something that could bother Ward. They need to not let him break the pocket, and they need to actually, it sounds funny, but I think they are more comfortable with Ward getting the ball out of his hands quicker in 2.5 seconds or less, because when he extends and he breaks the pocket and he starts looking downfield when he's just creeping out of the pocket in space by himself, then you have a serious problem where he makes those game-changing plays. So I expect Manny Diaz, the one thing against SMU last week, Kevin Jennings was a guy that you don't want to blitz, okay? Cam Ward, so Diaz didn't do it. Cam Ward is a guy maybe you do just so you get the ball out of his hands, take a chance on the outside making tackles, and let your secondary work.
Absolutely, because their secondary has been really, really good this year. So you're banking on that bothering Cam Ward. And the other side is the same thing, Dawn, is can Miami bother Malik Murphy? So Duke's had its fair share of offensive struggles this year. They're really much a very defensive team, obviously under Manny Diaz. But the one thing offensively they have been able to rely on is the offensive line to protect the quarterback at an elite level. So far this year, the Blue Devils have only allowed a sack or a hit on 3.4% of their pass blocking snaps. That's the 9th lowest rate in the country. They have a 16% pressure rate allowed. That's 12th lowest in the country. Malik Murphy, big quarterback, not a very mobile quarterback though. So in a clean pocket, he's an 83.4 PFF grade, really solid. When he's under pressure, that drops to a 45.9 PFF grade. So fortunately for him, he's got an offensive line that really protects him and allows him to get those clean pockets. But when he is under pressure, you've seen a lot of wars. I mean, you see a lot of times he has a big arm, the inaccuracies show up. When he doesn't have a stable platform to throw from, that's when you see him airmail passes a lot, or even short throw passes a lot as well. The issue in this game for Duke, though, Miami leads the nation in pressure rate at 43%, and they're second in pass rush win rate at 52.1%. Dalton, we were at that Miami-Louisville game, and we were on the field, and we were looking at Miami's D-line. We're like, dude, that's an NFL D-line.
Monsters.
Right there. Monsters. Tyler Barron, Ruben Bain Jr., Simeon Barrow, bunch of other guys, too, that are really, really good players. So those guys are really going to test Duke's offensive line, a really good offensive line, more than ever before. But if they can protect him, Miami has shown some vulnerabilities in their secondary in recent weeks. So Murphy could have opportunities to win downfield as long as the offensive line gives him time. It also should be noted, Malik Murphy leads the nation in average time to throw, only 2.2 seconds. He's the fastest quarterback in the country getting rid of the football. So that does take a lot of the pressure off the offensive line, but I still think this is a critical matchup for Duke to create explosive passing plays down the field like other offenses like Louisville did too. They've been able to do it against Miami when you protect them. But if you can't protect them, then that's when Malik Murphy and other quarterbacks against Miami start to get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, the front four is the foundation of Miami's defense. And I thought Murphy played his best game of the season last week against SMU. I don't think by any means was he the reason that they lost that football game. They just didn't finish drives. They didn't capitalize on SMU's mistakes. But he threw the ball really well. He's going to have to be at least as good as he was last week, if not better. But you mentioned it. If you can get the ball into Miami's secondary, they have been struggling. They've been giving up a lot of points and a lot of big plays. So if Duke can protect, if their offensive line has been as good as it has been all year, and Murphy does get rid of the ball and make some big throws downfield, last week I believe he had 3 or 4 big-time throws, then you talk about that's when Duke can have a chance at this thing.
Absolutely. So Dalton, in Miami's most difficult game the rest of the season, will they pull it off and continue their undefeated year, or will Duke pull off a massive upset?
I think Miami gets it done here. I think Duke's coming off a very emotional week last week with the loss that they took to SMU, and you have this element to me. Duke has to be absolutely perfect on both sides of the ball to win this game. Murphy, I think, has to play maybe the best game of his career. The zone blitzes and everything Manny Diaz does, that he did a great job with Kevin Jennings last week, but they forced 6 turnovers in that game, and SMU still found a way to score 28 points. So it's just hard when you're playing great offenses to always play those tight to the vest games. I've got Miami 30 and Duke 21. I could see absolutely a road where Duke competes here. I think their defense is legitimately really good, but they need Murphy to keep his cool, especially if he's going to be under pressure against this front four. And to win this game, I think he would have to be absolutely perfect. I don't see a road where Duke, after last week when they played so good on defense and just didn't come through with it, I don't see a road where they play an absolutely perfect game in this environment against this Miami team with Cam Ward, who there's not a whole lot of answers for.
Absolutely. So you have Duke easily covering the 3-touchdown spread that is on that right
now.
Yeah,
I think their defense is better than that. I think it can travel. Now, I do understand the idea behind what Miami could do if their defense shows up and Duke's offense just can't find points, but I don't know that Duke is 3 touchdowns worse than Miami. And we've seen Miami at a lot of points, in ACC play look shaky. Right? I mean, between the comebacks they've had and even against Louisville, their defense had a lot of issues against Louisville and Tyler Shuck. And look, Duke, are they the most dynamic offense ever? No, but they're opportunistic, and their defense, I think their defense can keep them in this game.
I agree with that. I don't really agree with the 3-touchdown spread either. I have Miami winning this one 35-20. I do think the defense will keep it interesting early. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a bad interception or two from Cam Ward, because Manny Diaz is I know as a Penn State fan, such a great defensive mind, just making quarterbacks uncomfortable, honestly. And it's very hard. Cam Ward is probably the most comfortable quarterback in the country, the way he plays back there. He's so nonchalant. I love his play style. But Manny Diaz is still an elite guy at making quarterbacks uncomfortable. I think you can see that in this game against Cam Ward. Now, is it ultimately going to be enough for Duke to pull off the upset? I don't think so. But I think it's enough to cover the 3-touchdown spread. So it'll be close early, but it's impossible for Duke to hold Cam Ward down for too long, especially if the offense just does not perform. I think Miami's going to win this game 35-20 and continue its undefeated season. Another noon game, the last noon game we're talking about is number 19 Ole Miss at Arkansas. That game is on ESPN. And Dalton, the storyline to know is that Ole Miss has his back against the wall right now. They entered the year as the number 6 team in college football, and they were viewed as a top contender to win the SEC, let alone make the college football playoff, win the SEC. But a couple months into the year now, the Rebels are 6-2, and they got to win out to make the college football playoff. So next week's game against Georgia, that we'll probably be previewing as long as they get through this game against Arkansas. We'll probably preview it anyways, honestly. But next week's Georgia, that's the ultimate test for Ole Miss. But you cannot overlook this road game against Arkansas because the Razorbacks, I almost put them in my top 25. They probably been like number 26 or 27 in my top 25. So they're a very good team. And they beat number 7 Tennessee at home just a few weeks ago. So this is not a game for Ole Miss to overlook. I know you got the big one next week against Georgia. You have to win that one. But you cannot overlook this game against Arkansas because they're a very dangerous team.
Yeah, no, they're a good football team, and they can if they get into the way that they want to play and they don't turn the ball over. If Taylor Green doesn't turn the ball over, they can beat almost anybody. I think in the country. I think they proved that against Tennessee. They play a physical, grinding style of football that might just play to their advantage here against Ole Miss.
Absolutely. So Dawn, you have the Ole Miss offense in this game. What should we be looking out for when the Rebels have the ball?
So we've talked a lot about Ole Miss offense lately and the fact that they have struggled to create explosive plays and in turn have struggled to manufacture offense because they're so based on, their success is so based on creating explosives that at times Jackson Dart hasn't been able to manufacture the short game. They've been struggling to run the ball. And I think they did a better job at the skill spots last week against Oklahoma, but you certainly have a lot of chances against an Oklahoma team who struggles to score, right? I think Dart, it was as good as he looked in a while. Without Trey Harris, I thought their offense, not that you don't want to have Trey Harris in there. They certainly hope he's in there this week, but Dart did a better job throwing to the sticks and moving the ball. But the consistent theme here, beyond that, has been the struggle of an offensive line that I think we kind of thought might have been their biggest weakness coming into the season. Once they've gotten into SEC play here, they've had a rough go of it against the physicality week in and week out of SEC opponents. I mean, you look at some of these numbers of their offensive line since week 5, all right, the last 4 games for Ole Miss, the last 5 weeks. Overall grade, 127th in the country. Pass blocking grade, 109th. Pressure percentage, 7th worst in the country. Then you get to the run game. Okay, are they run blocking at least? 125th in run blocking grade, and that bottom number there I want to mention, impact run block percentage. That's the number we have behind the scenes, 128th in the country. What that is the percentage of positively graded run blocks that they're producing compared to just their total number of reps, okay? And they're only getting a positively graded run block on somewhere around a quarter of their reps. Think about that. Like 1 in 4 blocks that they are grading positively. Average is somewhere near the high 40s or getting close to 50, and there are teams in that stretch who are up in the 70s and 80s and are just dominating in the run game. Ole Miss is doing the opposite. The up front, they are having problems. You can still feel it where they're not running the ball effectively by design, right? Dart can scramble sometimes, but they're not running the ball well. He's under a lot of heat. He's having to get rid of the ball before he wants to, and he can't create these explosives. Ole Miss has to be better in the trenches in this game against an Arkansas defensive line that's pretty good. It's a top 20 defensive line for our grading, and they're the 9th best run defense unit in the country when it comes to their front 4. You got guys like Landon Jackson and Eric Gregory up front who are really physical. They stop the run. You know Arkansas's plan. They want to run. They want to stop the run. They want to take an occasional big shot with Taylor Green on offense, but it starts with their defense stopping the run, and if you can't pass protect also against what is a relatively vulnerable Arkansas secondary, if you don't have time to throw, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
You can want to make those explosive plays, but if your quarterback isn't protected, none of it matters. I'm curious to see if Ole Miss is going to get anything out of their trench play because we have not seen their offensive line play well really in the last 4 games, and now you get an Arkansas team on the road who is very physical, and if Ole Miss comes out here and has one of their games where they rush for 50, 60, 70 yards and they're one-dimensional, I do think even though Arkansas's secondary has struggled, it's going to be a problem because they have the type of defense that they can play 2 safeties back. They can play cover 2. They can play in quarters especially, and they can just allow their front 7 to work without extra help in the run game. If that happens, and you have Jackson Dart throwing into too high coverages from long down and distance situations, I think Ole Miss runs into another problem this week, because for 4 weeks now of SEC play, we have seen them not play particularly good offense like we thought they would coming into the year.
No, listen, when we did our preview for Ole Miss, and I'll admit, we were very high on them. I think we had Ole Miss even higher than the AP poll. We had them like 4th in our preseason ranking. But we did a biggest strength for the team, every team, and a biggest weakness. Our biggest weakness was the offensive line, and that's coming to fruition right now. So your matchup to watch is about the trenches. My matchup to watch is about the trenches, because Ole Miss's front seven has been dominant this year. In fact, I would say, Dalton, they have the best front seven in college football this year. So their defensive line and linebackers as a unit has a 92.6 grade, 92.6 front seven grade. That's the highest in the nation right now. Ole Miss as a team leads the nation in run defense grade at 96.7. They lead the nation in tackling grade at 90.5, and they're 5th in pass rushing grade at 84.2. They are 2nd in yards per carry allowed at 3.3, and they're 6th in pressure rate at 40%. They've got dudes in that front seven. Chris Paul Jr., Walter Nolan, they were named to our midseason All-American team. They got a lot more guys than that as well. They got to watch out for Jared Ivey, Prince Von Mielen, JJ Pegues, your guy as well. Dudes at D-tackle, at edge defender, and at linebacker. That is important for this game, because Arkansas loves to just establish their offense around their rushing attack. Jaquindon Jackson, he's 8th among all running backs in the country with a 90.1 rushing grade. Taylon Green is 4th among Power 4 quarterbacks with 511 rushing yards. Green, I'll also say, has been excellent under pressure this year. He is 6th in the nation with a 77.1 grade under pressure. So even if Ole Miss gets him under pressure, you got to bring him down as well, because he's a very, very dangerous runner, and he's also very, very good on the run, throwing on the run as well. So you got to bring him down. It's not just getting pressure on him. There's some quarterbacks like Malik Murphy just talked about, just get pressure on him. Taylon Green is not one of them. You got to bring him down. You got to really just hit him, honestly. I will say, though, Dalton, another thing to keep an eye on, though, Jaquindon Jackson is currently doubtful for this game because he missed last week against Mississippi State after re-aggravating an ankle injury. So that could be a big loss for Arkansas if he is indeed out for this game. But I will say his backup, Braylon Russell, has been impressive in limited action this year. He's averaging 7 yards per carry on 43 attempts. Even if Jaquindon Jackson is out for this game, they're still going to want to build it around the run game. So Ole Miss, who has the highest run defense grade in the country by a lot, their 96.7 is a very, very high grade, that they still really need to perform as a front seven. Because if not, Arkansas could have opportunities with some deep shots in that Ole Miss secondary. Like, it's kind of the same thing as Ole Miss on offense, where it's, okay, Arkansas secondary has some issues. Ole Miss has some issues in the secondary as well. So they need their front seven to continue performing like the best front seven in college football to avoid a upset from the Razorbacks this game.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's kind of surprising, even though they did bring in some really good transfers, kind of surprising that this front seven has been the best part of their team this year. But now, I mean, I got to be honest, Taylon Green, I got to give him a lot of credit last week. I know they were playing Mississippi State, but after a real tough game against LSU 2 weeks ago, he came back. I believe he might have been the highest graded quarterback in the country last week, just tore Mississippi State to shreds. I think they scored 58 points in that game. Taylon's been fun this year. Actually, he's been better than I thought. He's been explosive. He's big. He can run the ball. He had multiple 70-yard touchdown runs when he was at Boise State last year. This is an interesting matchup, and I think one where you're right, it could come down to who can create more of those explosive plays, possibly through the air.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dalton, in this must-win game for Ole Miss to keep their playoff hopes alive, will the Rebels do it and set up a massive, massive matchup against Georgia next week, or will Ole Miss's playoff hopes die in Fayetteville, Arkansas?
Boy, that matchup against Georgia, that looks awfully big, doesn't it?
It does.
It does. I mean, the problem is it looks a little less big if they get upset here, and I think Ole Miss has enough issues on offense that I'm taking the cheese. I'm taking Arkansas to win this game. I think I have them 27-24. I think these two teams are a lot more similar than we think. And I think we would still look at Arkansas a little bit differently if they had one less loss and they hadn't blown that game to Oklahoma State. And they can definitely go through stretches, where their secondary, it's not great, especially when opposing quarterbacks get time in the pocket. But there's just something about this Ole Miss offense that makes me very uncomfortable. I just think it's not for whatever reason, even with most of the same pieces, it is not the same as it was last year. They're struggling to run the ball consistently. They're not getting into the tempo that they want to get to, and they really need Trey Harris back for this game. I know last week they got through Oklahoma without him, but I think Ole Miss – I think Arkansas plays a more physical football game. I think as long as Talon Green doesn't turn the football over, I think Arkansas can come out with this win. I'm going to take the Razorbacks.
Okay, taking the upset. I am going with Ole Miss in this one. I've taken the 34-21. If Trey Harris is back, I think they will thrive against a vulnerable Arkansas secondary, and I think Ole Miss's front seven is able to keep the Razorbacks in check. So I think Ole Miss will keep their playoff hopes alive with a win over Arkansas, at least for one more week, keep the playoff hopes alive. There's a big one next week against Georgia that we'll, of course, talk about. But I do think Ole Miss will ultimately win this one over Arkansas 34-21. All right, now getting into the 3:30 slate now, starting off with number 1 Oregon at Michigan. This game is on CBS, and the storyline to know is pretty simple. It's the defending national champs against the new number 1 team in college football right now. And Oregon, I mentioned before, Michigan won the national championship last year. Oregon looking to win their first ever national title for their program. So Michigan is the defending champs, but they've looked like a shell of their prior selves, Dawn. They already have 3 losses this year. They lost 3 games in the previous 3 years combined. 2 of those 3 losses came in the college football playoff. They only suffered 1 loss in the regular season over the last 3 years, and now they have 3 so far this year. So it's been a rough go for Michigan lately. Oregon, number 1 in the AP poll for the first time since 2012. That was Chip Kelly's final year as head coach of Oregon. That is the last time that Oregon was number 1 in the country. They started off slow, but now they are clicking in all 3 phases, and they've beaten 3 currently ranked teams in Ohio State, Boise State, and Illinois. Still, you're in the big house. It's going to be a great environment. It's one of the biggest stadiums in the world with a great fan base. They got to be careful against Michigan, who still has an elite defense as well. So, listen, I'm not saying that Michigan's going to ultimately win this game. We'll get into our predictions at the very end of it, but this is not a game for Oregon to just look over and be like, oh, we'll be fine in this game.
No, you have a team with a winning pedigree and a bunch of talent, especially on defense, on that defensive line. That if they play it right and you let them run the ball on offense and get to where they want to go and play the style of game that they want to play, that they can beat anybody. I think Michigan's defense can keep them tight in any game. And Oregon, we've seen at times this year where they're not as physical maybe as you thought they were. So it's an interesting road game, and Oregon, it's probably their toughest test left as far as the rest of the regular season, and I think they have the clearest path to the playoff right now since they've already beaten Ohio State and a couple other ranked teams like you mentioned.
Yeah, it's either Michigan or Washington, honestly, who beat Michigan, right? Those are 2 of the arguments. But yeah, it really is probably the toughest test left that Oregon has so far this year. And Dalton, you have the Oregon offense in this one, so what should we be looking out for? You have the Michigan offense in this one. What should we be looking out for the Wolverines of the ball?
We've had this thing all year where they have been changing up quarterbacks and going back and forth and figuring out who's working. We had Davis Warren earlier in the year. Then we went to Alex Orji and basically the permanent Wildcat sort of thing. Then they went to Jack Tuttle, and that was a struggle. And now Tuttle has medically retired now, right? Which is obviously unfortunate. You'd like to see him finish the season, but no, I mean, it's good for him to make the best decision for his own health. And now we're back to Davis Warren, who last week, honestly, played the best game of the season by a Michigan quarterback. And it speaks to the standard where we are that he threw for 120 yards in that game, and that's considered probably the best game of any game this season by a Michigan quarterback. Look, it's back to where we were at the beginning of the season when we talked about this team even back when we were previewing the Texas game, where they need to run the ball. They're going to find Colson Loveland somewhere in the passing game, move him around the formation. And last week they really kind of tilted the momentum of the Michigan State game that they won by a touchdown with some trick plays, right? Sharon Moore threw some fancy stuff in there. Got Alex Orji going in the Wildcat. I felt like we were back in the first 3 weeks of the season where it was like, oh, okay, we're back to this. And we got Alex Orji's the changeup, and Davis Warren makes an occasional throw, and Colson Loveland. So I think it's the same Michigan offense really that we've seen all season. And I think it just gets summed up when you talk about they're 121st in passing grade, right? And they're back to their opening day starter again. They have the 5th fewest yards per game, passing yards per game in the country, the 4th fewest yards per attempt. I mean, it's just...
I think they're second worst in EPA per pass, and only Kennesaw State is below.
Yeah.
So it kind of is a microcosm.
Big win over Liberty, though.
Big win over Liberty.
Big win over Liberty.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's just about Michigan. I mean, again, last week it felt like a positive step, and then you look at the box score and you go, oh, they threw for 120 yards. I mean, that's got plus Donovan Edwards threw a touchdown also, which but again,
QB1 Donovan Edwards.
He might be. It's been a struggle, and if they can build on last week and find any sort of balance, cool. Because you're not going to be a team like Oregon one dimensionally. You're just not going to do it. So if Warren can build on that, that's a positive outing, and he could have another one in this game. And obviously they're going to lean on the run game and the defense and try to keep it low scoring. Cool, but it's obviously no matter who the quarterback is, it's been a struggle for Michigan to throw the ball all season.
It really has been, honestly. And the other side of the ball, can Oregon's offensive line hold up in this game? So the Oregon offense overall has been really good in a lot of areas this year, right? They have a top 25 passing grade in the country, top 25 rushing grade in the country, top 25 receiving grade in the country. Dylan Gabriel, according to DraftKings Sportsbook, is tied with Travis Hunter for the best odds to win the Heisman Trophy right now. By all accounts, Oregon has elite players at all the skill positions. Dylan Gabriel, Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart, Jordan James. They got elite players everywhere, right? The one area, offensively, where Oregon's had some issues is along the offensive line. So far this year, Oregon's had kind of an average offensive line. They're right now 69th in the country in offensive line grade at 68.2. They have really good tackles. Josh Connerly Jr., Ajani Cornelius. Their tackle duo is 23rd in the nation in PFF grade. The biggest issue has been on the interior offensive line for the Ducks. Their starting three of Marcus Harper, Yapani Lalulu, and Nashad Strother is 110th among interior offensive lines in PFF grade this year. That is a major issue because Michigan's defensive line has the best pair of defensive tackles in college football in Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. Both of those guys are top 10 prospects on PFF's big board right now for the 2025 NFL Draft. Mason Graham leads all Power 4 defensive tackles with an 89.1 grade this year. And it's not just the defensive tackles. I mentioned before that they have great offensive tackles, Oregon does. They still got to deal with Michigan's edge defenders, right? Josiah Stewart just won our Defensive Player of the Year award for college football. He's been the highest graded defensive player in college football. Michigan's defensive line as a whole is the highest graded defensive line in college football at 92.1. They lead the nation in pass rushing grade at 91.6 and tied for second in run defense grade at 90.3. So Oregon's offensive line, if they do their job, Dylan Gabriel and those weapons I just talked about, they should tee off on Michigan's secondary because right now Michigan is 79th in coverage grade and superstar corner Will Johnson is questionable for Saturday after missing last week against Michigan State with a lower leg injury. If Michigan wants any chance of making this game a close game, as low scoring as possible, they need to do that, right? They need the defensive line to be the most dominant unit on the field against what's been kind of an average Oregon offensive line. And even more so, just diving even more into it, Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, they got to be the two best players on the field. But they do have an opportunity against what's been a well below average interior offensive line for Oregon.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we've seen Michigan, even through their losses, that defensive line has dominated week in and week out. I think about their win over USC, even their loss to Washington. They were dominant, and just Washington got rid of the football before they could sack Will Rogers. So it is one of the best, if not the best, defensive line in the country. And that's the number one problem when you're playing the Wolverines is you have to figure out if or how you're going to block these guys, and if not, how you're going to avoid them, because they do cause a lot of problems inside.
Absolutely. So, Dalton, ultimately, will Oregon go into the big house and prove why they're the number one team in the country, or will Michigan pull off what could be the biggest upset of the year?
I think this is the last big step for Oregon towards the playoff, right? A road game against Michigan, who's got a great defense, who's a lot to handle in the trenches. But I think the formula for beating Michigan is pretty simple at this point. Don't let them get 300 yards rushing on the ground. And get rid of the football. Even if you can't win the battle inside, get rid of the football in time so those guys just can't get sacks and really start pressuring the quarterback, right? I don't have the updated number, but I know earlier in the year I was talking about opposing quarterbacks against Michigan were averaging a 2.4 second average time to throw. Get rid of the football because Michigan's coverage unit is not as good as it's been in past years, especially last year when it was historically great, right? And especially if Will Johnson is out, these Oregon receivers are going to have opportunities on the outside to make plays. We know how good Tez Johnson is. Evan Stewart's been coming on lately. They got some other guys who can make plays in space. I think Oregon makes a statement in this one. I've got Oregon 34-13. I just think at this point, there is a pretty clear formula how to beat this Michigan team. Don't beat yourself. Don't turn the ball over. Get rid of the football if you're Dylan Gabriel. Don't hold the football and take sacks in this game and create negative plays. And I think Oregon will just they'll be just fine.
Okay. Yeah, I got Oregon winning as well. And a little bit of a closer one. I got 30-17 in this one. I honestly don't. If Michigan had any sort of a competent passing attack, I think they'd have a shot in this game, honestly, with that defensive line against that offensive line. But unfortunately for their defensive line and their defense overall, it doesn't have a competent passing game right now. And I think Oregon ultimately prevails on the road and shows why it's the number one team in college football with a double-digit win over Michigan in the Big House. Next one we're talking about is the number 2 team in college football, Georgia against Florida in Jacksonville in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. My storyline to going into this game, Dalton, is can Florida prove that is moving in the right direction as a program? There was a lot of pessimism around the Florida Gators entering the year. They endured 3 straight losing seasons entering this year. That's the first time that's occurred for Florida since the 1940s. Head coach Billy Napier entered the year on one of the hottest seats in America, and he needed to prove his legitimacy against one of the most, maybe the most brutal schedule in college football. So far, it's been okay for the Florida Gators, honestly. They're currently 4-3. They're coming off a close overtime loss to number 7 Tennessee, a dominant 28-point win over Kentucky in their last 2 games. DJ Lagway has shown a lot of encouraging signs for the future. He was the highest-rated quarterback coming out of high school last year, and he currently leads all true freshmen with a 78.5 passing grade. But now's the time for Billy Napier in Florida to further show that they can hang with the big boys in the SEC. Their next 4 games are against number 2 Georgia, a road trip to number 6 Texas. They host number 16 LSU, and they host number 19 Ole Miss. Their next 4 games are against top 20 opponents, with the hardest one being this one against number 2 Georgia. Winning one of those games is pretty much a priority, I would say, for Florida, because you win one of those 4 games, you beat Florida State at the end of the year, you make a bowl game. Billy Napier might be able to keep his job if they make a bowl game, but if he doesn't win one of those 4 games, at 5-7, they probably will move on from them. Even Dalton, listen, this is probably the least winnable out of all those 4 games, but even if they don't beat Georgia, even if they look competitive against a national championship contender, national championship favorite, that'll go a long way for those boosters and the fan base to say, okay, you know what? We can hang with the big boys in the SEC. So really, this is a big game for Florida, even if they don't win it. Just prove that you belong on the field with Georgia.
Yeah, it's gonna be big, because I think there were too many games last year and even against Miami in week 1 this year where it just wasn't even competitive, like you mentioned. So I think the ideal scenario for Napier in this program is they're gonna be okay, and they're gonna build around Lagway, and they'll find talent around him to work with, right? So it is a big game and a big stretch for them to see just compete through the rest of the season, right? Obviously they're not going to win the conference or go to the playoff or anything like that, but keep competing against these good teams and see who you have that you can carry into next year.
Absolutely. So, Don, you have the Georgia offense in this one. So what should we be looking out for when the Bulldogs and Carson Beck have the ball?
So this Florida secondary, even though on paper it looks like they've been slightly better lately, this Florida secondary still keeps me up at night. They're 78th in the country in coverage grade, and if I take out one game where they dominated Samford, who's an FCS team, that drops down to 115th. This has been the biggest problem for me, maybe even more so than the offense, is just Florida making mistakes in the secondary and giving up big plays. And they're facing their biggest test this week in Carson Beck since they played Cam Ward in week 1, because they played a lot of teams that are really shaky in the passing game, right? You talk about Kentucky, you talk about, I think, Mississippi State. They played
Tennessee.
They played UCF. Tennessee, even though they were number 7 in the country, Tennessee has a hard time throwing the ball. They haven't played a really tight passing game since that Miami game. So now you talk about, okay, now for me, more even just as much as Lagway against Kirby Smart, the defense, which is hard enough. Now you've got a Florida secondary where I go, okay, Is there any improvement here 7-8 weeks later from what we saw them getting torn up in that Miami game? And the one big obstacle that you have with this Georgia team, even though they haven't consistently dropped back and just thrown the football all that well, Carson Beck is still really dangerous in play action. If Georgia gets the running game going, Trevor Etienne revenge game maybe.
Oh, good call,
might be a thing. But, if they get the run game going, they get into play action, Carson Beck has still been fantastic when he gets to just run this system and get into play action. 89.1 play action passing grade is the 9th best in the country still. 9.3 yards per attempt, 77.8% adjusted completion rate. So if you let Georgia get two-dimensional in their offense and you let Carson Beck get into the play action and your linebackers step up and your safety step up and he starts seeing those lanes down the field, you're going to have a problem still. And Florida against play action has just a 58.7 coverage grade. So this to me is going to be the test of, okay, I've actually had even bigger issues when I watched the Gators the last year and a half with their defense than their offense. Can your defense just keep you in this game and not give up these explosive plays and have these mental mistakes that they've been making against better passing teams the last year and a half? If they can do that in this game, maybe they can keep themselves in it.
Absolutely. My other side, my match to watch on is about the quarterback as well. It's the kid, DJ Lagway, against the best defensive mind in college football, and Kirby Smart, who, by the way, Kirby Smart has had 2 weeks of preparation for this game. That should be a little scary if you're a Florida fan with how good Kirby Smart is as a defensive mind. But listen, starting off with Lagway, it's hard not to be excited about this kid if you're a Florida fan or even a college football fan in general, because this kid, number 3 overall recruit in the 2024 class, he took over for the injured Graham Mertz and has looked really admirable as a starting quarterback for Florida. 9 big-time throws, 2 turnover-worthy plays. I mentioned before, like a 78 passing grade as well. This kid has ridiculous arm talent with the ability to deliver to any part of the field with ease, honestly. I mean, he was throwing like frozen ropes 40 yards down the field. I was watching his tape last night, Dalton. That has really just unlocked pages of the playbook that were not accessible with Graham Mertz as a quarterback. Now, you could throw the ball downfield, and guys like Elijah Badger and Shamir DK have really benefited from that, right? It's no longer a conservative offense. You could push the ball downfield now if you're Florida and not having a conservative quarterback like Graham Mertz. But now you go against Kirby Smart. He's had 2 weeks to prepare for him, and Georgia loves to just kind of confuse quarterbacks, right? They're 6th among Power 4 schools in blitz rate at 48%. They're 6th among Power 4 schools in stunt rate at 39.5%. They try to speed quarterbacks up and confuse them. And you saw Quinn Ewers a couple weeks ago was in a blender against that Georgia defense. He committed 7 turnover-worthy plays. That is tied for the most by a Power 5 quarterback over the last 5 years of college football. Lagway, I will say, though, has done really well against the blitz. He currently is 8th among FBS quarterbacks with an 86.6 passing grade when blitzed. He's also very impressive against stunts, 80.3 passing grade against stunts. That's 24th in the country. If he's going to do the impossible and vanquish Kirby Smart, he'll likely need to follow the blueprint that Jalen Moreau had a few weeks ago now. Jalen Moreau and DJ Lagway, if you really look at them, they're very similar, right? They both have big arms. They both can run a little bit too, and both of them want to go to the deep ball. They want to uncork their bazooka right arms and just show it off. But Moreau in that game was forced to be a lot more conservative against Georgia, and then when it was available, like the Ryan Williams touchdown at the very end, then you take the shot. But you don't take shots every play. Lagway, you look at his tape, you could tell this kid wants to just show off his arm every chance he gets. So if he wants a chance at performing well against this defense, like Jalen Moreau did, patience is key. You got to be patient in this game for him. And strike when the opportunity is there rather than throwing it deep downfield every play and playing right into Kirby Smart's hands. So I think following the Jalen Moreau blueprint should be the key for Lagway in this game, because if he's just trying to uncork the deep ball every single play, that's when you get issues, and Kirby Smart's going to make him pay for it.
Yeah, I think Georgia, what Kirby Smart does so well in his defense is the perfect balance of aggression. You mentioned the blitzing, and yet still preventing explosive plays, right? It's the combination of those two things that any defensive coordinator wants, and Kirby always gets out of his defenses. So I don't think you're right. I think it's that Lagway, he can't force He just can't force balls into Georgia's secondary because you already know at that point Malachi Starks is coming. That's just gonna happen. You have to wait. You have to wait for those moments and wait for those opportunities. Obviously, it always helps to run the ball, but that's kind of the beauty of Georgia's defense is they get to balance those two things, and they are the masters at it. And like you mentioned, Kirby, so good. We saw it against Texas too. Texas didn't have anything vertically down the field. No. Nothing. He was going to make Quinn Ewers work underneath, or he was going to get pressure to him. So I think Lagway really has to pick his spots for those deep balls, and he's got to not make big mistakes. Because there's sometimes under pressure where he can just kind of fling the ball somewhere and some bad things happen. So I do think it's going to be a fun challenge for Lagway going up against Kirby.
Absolutely. So, Dalton, in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, who wins between these arch rivals?
I just have a hard time seeing Lagway and at such a young age beating Kirby Smart in that defense. In Florida, I still question their defense. I've got Georgia 34-20. I still think they take care of business. I just think as long as they don't give up some sort of big play that puts them behind early in the game, I think they'll have enough to get this done.
Yeah, I got Georgia even winning by a bigger margin than you. I have it 37-17. Listen, Lagway, this kid is supremely talented. He has a bright future. Trevor Sikkema, Florida grad, was telling me he's the most talented quarterback they brought in since Tim Tebow. Honestly, we all know how good Tim Tebow was. As good as he is and as talented as he is, he's not quite ready for this game just yet. I don't think so, at least. We'll see. Maybe he proves me wrong. But with Kirby Smart coming off a bye week, having 2 weeks to prepare for this kid, I think he'll take advantage of his inexperience and force him into some bad turnovers and bad plays in this game. And then on the other side of the ball, I think Carson Beck will shine against Florida's secondary. So I have Georgia winning this one 37-17. All right, Dalton, before we get to our remaining games in our slate, we got to talk about the sponsor of this show, and that is the great Cheribundi, the performance drink that is fueling the health fleet revolution. It's got natural products and ingredients with no added sugar. Tart cherries are the highest antioxidant fruit or vegetable in the entire world. It's got a natural anti-inflammatory with incredible benefits like reduced soreness, increased recovery. Also contains naturally occurring melatonin that helps you improve your sleep as well. It helps support your immunity. It's used by nearly 500 collegiate and professional sports teams. Every NFL team uses Cheribundi. 10 of the last 11 Super Bowl champions use Cheribundi as a part of their daily regimen. Every team playing in Europe or Brazil this year has had Cheribundi with them. All but one Power 4 conference football team uses Cheribundi. Every football and basketball national champion since 2007 uses Cheribundi as well. Their products are available on Amazon, cheribundi.com, and at retailers nationwide, including Publix and Kroger. And Dalton, it is delicious as well. And every time I do this ad read, I'm just blown away by how many champions they have, that every one of them uses this product as well. So if you want to be a champion like them, use Cheribundi because it is an outstanding product.
I was just thinking that too. It seems to be the drink of champions, huh? All those benefits, and hey, you get to win with it too. So how can you beat that?
It's outstanding. So cheribundi.com, anywhere, Publix and Kroger, Amazon, anywhere, retailers nationwide, highly recommend it. It is outstanding. All right, next game we're talking about is Texas Tech at number 11, Iowa State. Also a 3:30 game on ESPN. Storylines to know is about the Cyclones. Can they keep up this historic start? They've been one of the biggest surprises in college football so far this year. They started the season unranked, and now Iowa State is in the top 15. They're 7-0, Dalton, for the first time since 1938. Dalton, that was a year that occurred during the Great Depression. So since the Great Depression, Iowa State has not had a start this good before. If they beat Texas Tech, they'll be 8-0 for the first time ever. Iowa State has never gone 8-0 in school history, and that would move the program one step closer to playing in the Big 12 title game and also securing a college football playoff spot as well. Even if they don't win the Big 12 title, if they go 12-0, they're in the college football playoff, no matter what happens in the title game. So it's been a really awesome story to watch the Iowa State Cyclones under Matt Campbell this year. And like I said, it's been one of the best starts they've had in program history.
No, they're a good team, and Matt Campbell runs, I think he's got one of the best cultures of any program in the country with the amount of guys that he keeps year over year. Doesn't lose many guys to the transfer portal. I think I saw a stat where he had the highest retention rate of his roster of any team in the country from last year, right? So he builds a culture. He's got his guys playing fundamentally sound ball, and they keep winning every every week.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, you have the Iowa State offense. So, we should be looking out for when the Cyclones and Rocco Becht have the ball.
All right, so Texas Tech, they find themselves in a lot of shootouts for sure. They have a good offense and all of that. You'll get to that side of it, but they struggle on defense, and they really struggle to cover. They have the 4th lowest coverage grade in the Power 5. And when you're going against this Iowa State team, the headline is Rocco Becht at quarterback, and a really good group of receivers headlined by Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll on the outside, right? Higgins on the outside, Knoll a little bit more in the slot. They got some other good players too, Eli Green, Ben Bramer. But I really want to highlight how good Rocco Becht is, and I think the first priority when you're playing against Iowa State is preventing these middle-of-the-field throws that he just excels at. Rocco Becht, okay, when he's throwing over the middle third of the field this season, has a 91.7 passing grade. That's big time. That's big time stuff. 84% adjusted completion rate over the middle of the field, 13.1 yards per attempt. It's lethal. Whether it's an RPO slant, it could be a deep shot play action post to Jalen Knoll, which we've seen, it feels like a million times this year. It could be Ben Bramer running up the seam. Rocco Becht, they don't throw over the middle as often as some other teams in the country, but when they do it, they're just spectacular. It's just explosive play after explosive play. They just make things happen up the seams of a defense. And I think if you're Texas Tech, a team that's already struggling in coverage, and it's hard enough to prioritize these guys, man. Jaden Higgins is a tough cover. He's a big body. Jalen Knoll, I've told you before, makes every clutch play imaginable for this Cyclones team. They've got weapons. They've got a smart quarterback with a quick trigger, and he works the ball down the middle of the field. So I just think Texas Tech, look, they have a lot to worry about in coverage. They have themselves to worry about in coverage because it's been such a hard time preventing teams through the air scoring points. But if you don't stop Rocco Becht throwing absolute lasers down the middle of the field, good luck to you, because that's where a ton of their big plays have come from this year.
Absolutely. And listen, they're just sitting in the middle of the field, and they struggled there. I mean, they're missing guys like Dadrian Taylor-Emerson and Miles Cole and other guys in that secondary they had
Tyler
last
Owens
year.
last year.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, Owens, who doesn't believe space is real, right? That was one of the
something like that.
Yeah, it was one of the things at the combine. Yeah. He was the star of the combine, that's for sure. He also was a crazy athlete too, so he was great.
He set was it broad jump record? I think it was.
I think it was. Yeah, he was crazy. Yeah.
I mean, they had some really good guys back there. You mentioned a safety last year, and the entire secondary struggled. I can't. Yeah. It's not even one area. They have just struggled in general to cover. When you think about, I think the 3 teams below them were in the Power 5 were West Virginia and Mississippi State and Purdue, I think it was. I mean, when you're down in that category with those teams in coverage, it's a problem, and they've found themselves in way too many high-scoring games that their defense just can't handle.
No, absolutely. But one guy that didn't lose, Dolan, was from last year was Taj Brooks. And that's kind of the matchup to watch here is, can Iowa State slow down Taj Brooks? He's not just the star of their offense, he is the offense for Texas Tech. He currently has 179 carries this year. Only Amarion Hampton has more carries among FBS backs this year than Taj Brooks. And we all know, with all the injuries North Carolina's had offensively, how Amarion Hampton is quite literally the offense. Taj Brooks is right behind him, honestly, for Texas Tech. He has 921 yards on those carries. He's moved the chains 52 times this year, the 4th most in the country. He is a human bowling ball at 5'10", 230 pounds. And usually, Dawn, when you have that many carries, you start to worry about the health of the running back, right? Taking that many hits. He inflicts the hits on defenders, right? He's inflicting more pain on would-be tacklers than they are on him, right? So he's a bowling ball. Iowa State and their defensive coordinator, John Heacock, really kind of created and patented the 3-3-5 defense, which is very, very good in the secondary and very, very good at stopping passing plays down the field. What it's not great at, though, is stopping the run, because makes sense. They only have 3 defensive linemen on the field, only 6 front 7 players. They have a front 6, not a front 7 out there. That's a significant issue for the Cyclones in this game. Right now, Iowa State is 108th in run defense grade and 116th in yards per carry allowed at 5.7. And 2.3 of those yards come before contact, which is the 4th most in the Power 4. So that means if you give Taj Brooks a full head of steam downhill against their DBs and linebackers, that could be a long, long day for their defense. So is critical in this game for them to stop the run and stop Taj Brooks, because he is quite literally the entirety of Texas Tech's offense. And also, it's even more critical when Baron Morton, their quarterback, might be out in this game. He suffered an injury to his non-throwing shoulder last week. Will Hammond, a talented true freshman, but still a true freshman, would be in line to start if Baron Morton is out of this game. So if Morton is out, it's even more paramount for the Cyclones to stop Taj Brooks.
Yeah, no, that's the big thing is we question Iowa State in the trenches sometimes, and I thought they did an excellent job when they played West Virginia, and we both picked West Virginia to win that game because we thought that run game would give them issues, and Iowa State survived through that and made enough plays in their passing game to get through it. So, no, it is a challenge. Tackling Taj Brooks is one of the biggest challenges in college football for sure. He's so physical, and he could cause a lot of problems for him inside.
Absolutely. So, Dalton, ultimately, will Iowa State's undefeated season end, or will the Cyclones go 8-0 for the first time ever?
I think they're going 8-0. And I see there is the big advantage for Texas Tech with Taj Brooks, but I think Iowa State has advantages just about everywhere else. I think they have advantage in both passing games when you talk about their offense with Rocco Becht and their receivers against a struggling secondary. I think on defense where Iowa State's one of the best coverage teams in the nation against a Texas Tech passing game that can be up and down. And then I think, look, honestly, their run game has been good too when you talk about maybe they're not the best blocking team, but they've gotten it done with three different backs now. You've got Abu Sama, you've got Carson Hansen, and you've got Jalen Jackson now. And I think Rocco Becht has been doing more with his feet of late. I think he's become a solid weapon on the ground, especially scrambling. So I think there's a lot of advantages for Iowa State in this game. They're at home. First time ever they could go 8-0. I think they'll do it 38-28 Iowa State.
Yeah, I'm going with Iowa State as well, 34-21. I think Taj Brooks will do everything he can to keep the Red Raiders in this game, but Rocco Becht and their uber-talented pass catchers, they're too much for Texas Tech's secondary to handle in this one. So I got Iowa State winning by 13 and going 8-0 for the first time ever in program history, which is a very, very cool story that we have in college football. Another game we're talking about, starting to get to the night slate now. Number 10, Texas A&M at South Carolina, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. Story to know is, can Texas A&M avoid slipping up now that it controls its own destiny? Because with the win over LSU this past Saturday, Texas A&M now has sole possession of first place in the SEC. If the Aggies can win their remaining regular season games, they'll book a trip to Atlanta and also clinch a spot in the college football playoff as well. That won't be easy, especially considering what's on deck this weekend. Texas A&M travels to South Carolina, currently in the top 30 of PFF power rankings right now. The Aggies also must figure out who their quarterback's going to be after Marcel Reed last week was so good, provided a spark that ignited their offense in the victory. Connor Wigman struggled against LSU as well. Mike Elko still has been non-committal on who's going to be starting in this one against South Carolina. So it's going to be interesting. I believe Marcel Reed will be the guy, but we'll see. But they really just can't avoid slipping up here because right now they control their own destiny.
I think more gamesmanship when it comes to the quarterback situation because those two guys are so different. Very much like we talked about with Penn State earlier. You've got Connor Wigman, who's a more traditional pocket passer, and you've got Marcel Reed, who brings all the option stuff and the run game stuff. I'm with you. I think after what we saw and really what we've seen all year with the way Texas A&M has played through their run game, I think Marcel Reed is going to play, but I think there's some gamesmanship there on the part of Elko and just not giving away that part and making it just a tiny bit harder for South Carolina to game plan.
Definitely. So, Dawn, you have the A&M offense. So what should we be looking out for when they have the ball?
All right, so you've got a South Carolina defense that we know is elite in pass defense. I mean, they're elite all the way around, but they're a little bit softer against the run. It's been more up and down. They've had some really good games in run defense. They've had some shakier ones. I thought it was a big reason that they lost to LSU early in the year. They gave up some rushing yards, and LSU got some tempo stuff. And what you're seeing from South Carolina is it's inconsistent. Okay, they've got 3 different games where their run defense grade was under 63. Now I think they have 3 other games where it was over 80 and they were just dominant. But it's about getting between the tackles. Okay, and Texas A&M has really excelled this year when they run between the tackles. You're talking about a team between the tackles. They're 8th in rushing grade. They're 14th in run blocking grade. They're 15th in EPA per play. They use all, especially with Reed in there, they use all sorts of different looks. But at the end of the day, it comes down to Le'Veon Moss and Amari Daniels mashing teams between the tackles behind what's an offensive line that I think, especially in the run game, has played really well this season. That's kind of been the metric, the X factor in those games that I talked about where South Carolina has struggled. They don't struggle keeping contained because they got monsters on the edge. We know that. And they got good players inside too, but there is the big difference when South Carolina has struggled is they've struggled between the tackles. And when they excel between the tackles, then the rest of their run defense is fine because you can't really – they're so fast and they have so many athletes out on the edge and even at safety coming down in the alley and things like that where they don't lose on runs to the outside. If you're going to beat South Carolina, okay, I think there's two things you can do. You can run right at them, right between the tackles, which A&M does, and you can use tempo, which is not necessarily a thing A&M does with their run game. They want to slow things down a little bit. They're not a team that goes no huddle and really goes fast, although in this game, maybe they do. You get late in the season, you got to break some tendencies. I think at least that first part is going to be the crucial part to watch in this game is when you talk about South Carolina's defenders between the tackles, especially like Tonka Hemingway and TJ Sanders on the inside going against all these run schemes. And I think as far as the quarterback thing goes, I got to be honest with you, I think it's going to have to be Reed in this game.
Yeah, I think so.
It's going to, between what we saw against LSU, and I think just stylistically, if you play Wigman, a more traditional pocket passer, and try to center it around what's been a very inconsistent passing game, this is not the defense you want to do that with. If I'm Mike Elko, I need to run the ball as much as possible in this game. I do not want this South Carolina defense pinning their ears back, throwing into this secondary with some really good players. O'Donnell Fortune at corner and Nick Imanwori at safety and all. They have an elite pass defense. They have an above-average run defense. That's the part I'm attacking. I'm putting Reed in there. I'm running right at him, and we're just going to see where this thing goes on the ground.
Yeah, it makes sense to start Reed because of how good he was against LSU. It also makes sense because you said, like, this is a game where they're going to want to run the ball, and if you're going to want to run the ball, you want your best athlete at quarterback, which is Marcel Reed.
Yeah.
That one as well. My matchup to watch, though, when South Carolina has the ball, is their offensive line against A&M's defensive line, because I think A&M has a clear advantage over them in that side when the Gamecocks have the ball. Just like last year, South Carolina's offensive line has struggled mightily this year. They currently have a 58.1 offensive line grade. That's 115th among FBS O-lines. South Carolina's given up a pressure on 42.3% of their dropbacks. At the third most in the Power 4 this year. Texas A&M's defensive line is 12th in PFF grade this year, and currently 3 Aggie defensive linemen are among the top 100 prospects on PFF's 2025 NFL Draft Big Board in Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, and Shamar Turner. Scorton, in particular, the number 1 edge defender on our big board right now. The Aggies are 7th in run defense grade and 31st in pass rushing grade this year. And making matters worse for South Carolina in this game is how much Lenora Sellers has struggled when he's under pressure. He has a 28.7 passing grade under pressure this year. That is 132nd among 141 qualifying quarterbacks. So Sellers has really struggled under pressure. South Carolina's offensive line has really struggled as well. And you're going up against an elite defensive line the Texas A&M's got.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's going to be the big thing. In South Carolina, realistically, they want to do the same thing A&M does now that A&M has Reed, is they want to run the ball, they want to get in all their option stuff, and maybe occasionally they want to make a big play. And Sellers, we've seen, is capable of making big plays, but things have broken down for him under pressure. But no, it's going to be, I think it's going to come down to, that last part, especially where who's going to make more mistakes in this game. You got 2 really young quarterbacks playing, 2 very similar quarterbacks playing, at least in style. It's going to be, you get 2 really good defenses playing in this game, don't you? This is going to be a fun physical matchup. And let's be honest, I know South Carolina, they're not going to go to the playoff or anything, but that's a tough road environment to play right now. With that defense, that's going to be I know A&M, last week they had at least the comfort of Kyle Field. This is going to be some environment, I think, going into Columbia.
And just take a peek behind the curtain real quick. Dalton, in my top 25, if I extended it to 26 teams, South Carolina would have been number 26 for me. So this is a team that's right on the edge of being a top 25 team in the country. This is not an easy game for A&M, especially in that environment in Columbia, South Carolina at night as well. That crowd goes crazy at night. Ultimately, Dalton, will Texas A&M continue to control its own destiny and win this game, or will South Carolina pull it off?
The more I thought about this game, it was really hard to pick. Because I got to be honest with you, I think with Reed at quarterback for A&M, I think these 2 teams are exactly the same. Yeah. I do. I think they both have really good defenses, right? And A&M's defense is coming on lately. They both have really good run games when you talk about Sellers and Sanders for South Carolina, and you talk about what A&M has with Reed in the backs. Neither one of them right now is wicked comfortable throwing the ball, at least in the drop back situation. So I think they're incredibly similar. I think you have it, whereas last week against LSU, Texas A&M, it was so different, right?
Yeah.
It was LSU they need to drop back and throw the football, and they're kind of more athletic on defense. They don't play like these two teams play. So I think what it came down to for me is Marcel Reed. There's been a lot of pressure on Marcel Reed, right? The spots he's had to come in. He had to go into the swamp and beat Florida. He had to come in the second half last week and save their season, and he was great, right? I haven't seen yet, and I know they've played tight in some tight games, right? The LSU game, although he got hurt, Sellers got hurt just before the half in that game. The Alabama game was close, and he made some good throws, but I haven't seen Lenora Sellers break through in that big spot like I've seen Marcel Reed do it like he did last week, right? And I think that might just be the difference in a game where it could come down to whichever quarterback makes the big mistake. I think it's a physical defensive game. Both teams want to run the ball. Give me Texas A&M 24-20. I was this close, I'll be honest with you, picking South Carolina, and I'm probably going to regret not doing it because I think this game is a lot closer than some people would think on the surface.
You're not the only one on the fence right now, Dalton. In the chat, Are You Yeti said, I picked South Carolina initially, but I think I changed my mind, honestly. So there's a lot of people that are going back and forth in this game.
It's a much tighter game than the records would make you think because South Carolina, I mean, they got, a field goal loss to LSU and a 2-point loss to Bama. That's a good team with a really good defense. You have a defense that good, you can play with anybody.
I think this game is, depending on who you ask, this game is going to be hideous. I think this is going to be a low-scoring game.
Would it shock you if it was 10-7?
Yeah, it's going to be. I got 20-17. I got A&M beating South Carolina. I think it's going to be ugly with how good these two defenses are, and each side has their own offensive issues, especially in the passing game as well. I think A&M will barely squeak out a win on the road, and they move one step closer to the SEC title game with a win over South Carolina, but I would not be surprised if it goes the other way either because I think South Carolina is a very, very good team. And like I said, they are right on the edge of being ranked for me in my top 25 right now. All right, next game we're talking about is the first of two ACC games that we're going to end the show with. Louisville at number 11, Clemson, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. Dalton, this is Clemson's toughest opponent since week 1 when they got blown out by Georgia. 34-3 loss to Georgia. They've rattled off 6 straight victories since then. But it's fair to say those 6 wins have not come against the stiffest competition so far. None of those 6 wins have come over a team that's even in the top 55 of PFF's power rankings. All of them are outside the top 55 teams in college football. This week, Clemson has an opportunity to prove, hey, we're actually legitimate against a good Louisville team. Right now, they're number 34 in our power ranking. Cardinals lost by 7 points to Miami in the game that we went to a couple weeks ago. So Louisville's already proven, hey, we can hang with the elite teams in the ACC, and they're going to try to do the same thing here against Clemson.
No, I'm with you. I think it is. It's why we haven't talked about Clemson, since week 1 against Georgia, have we? We haven't really gotten to them, and they figured some things out, I think, especially offensively. Now it gets into the meat of their schedule, right? They have to play Louisville. I think they're playing they have to go to Virginia Tech. I think you start getting into some of the tougher games, and we really see what Clemson looks like now. And as they start, at least what they think will be prep for the ACC title game, but they still have to take care of business. And Louisville's their first, I don't want to say real opponent in a long time, but one that might be able to stack up with them.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, you had the Clemson offense in this one who has a quarterback in Cade Klubnik. Looks like one of the most improved quarterbacks in the nation so far. So what should we be looking out for when he has the ball?
So the big thing, I'll start with Klubnik, and he's just been better and a bit more accurate throwing the ball downfield than he was last year. Last year, he only threw 28.6% of his passes at 10 or more air yards, right? They just weren't working the ball downfield. That number's up to 36.2% this year. Last year it was a 73 passing grade. This year is a 94. I believe it's top 5 in the country. Actually, it's actually the 4th best in the country. A 94 passing grade on 10-plus yard throws, 13 big-time throws, 14 touchdowns. What you're seeing from Cade Klubnik. Now, it's not perfect yet. It's not totally consistent yet, but it's, I think, a lot better footwork and a lot more confidence throwing the ball downfield. You know what? It's kind of that old saying, if he's even, he's leaving on the back end there when the receivers he's letting the ball go. I think last year there was a bit more, he was a bit more hesitant, and I think his footwork is a little bit better. It's still a work in progress, but you can see his lower body being a little more in sync, following through a little more on these throws and throwing with more conviction. So he's working the ball downfield, and that's going to be a big thing against Louisville's secondary. which to me has been a problem for them all season. I just think their defensive line is good. I like it. The secondary's, I think, been kind of disappointing. They've been giving up too many explosive plays, okay? Third lowest coverage grade in the Power 5 against 10-plus yard throws. We saw it in person when we saw them play Miami. It felt like Cam Ward, that he had a completion down the seam anytime he wanted. And it was just, that's the way it's been. Louisville, it's a lot of zone coverage, and they've been kind of just not tracking the football very well, I think, on these vertical throws. They've given up a lot more points this year. I thought their defense would be a lot better. So the combination to me of Klubnik's kind of new ability to get the ball downfield and Louisville this season giving up a lot of those explosive plays downfield, I think is a real problem for the Cardinals.
Absolutely is. And honestly, on the other side of the ball, it's about Tyler Shuck and Clemson's pass rush and whether or not they can get after Tyler Shuck, who, mentioned before, Dalton, this is a matchup of two quarterbacks who have been some of the most improved that we've had in college football. Cade Klubnik and Tyler Shuck as well. He's a 90.1 passing grade this year. Last year, 57.9 at Texas Tech in 2023. The biggest reason for that jump has been how good he's been when he has time in the pocket. The redshirt senior has a 92.4 passing grade when he's kept clean. Only Jackson Dart and Shedeur Sanders have higher clean pocket passing grades than Tyler Shuck so far this year among all quarterbacks in the country. On those clean pocket passing plays, he has 12 big-time throws and only one turnover-worthy play. When he's under pressure, he's still pretty good. I think he's like a top 25 passing grade under pressure, but still, it falls to a 62.3. So you go from a 92.4 to a 62.3, 6 big-time throws, 6 turnover-worthy plays. So he is noticeably worse when he's under pressure. And Louisville's offensive line has been kind of below average in protecting the quarterback this year, even more than below average. They're 111th in pressure rate allowed this year at 36.4%. So fortunately for Louisville, though, Clemson's pass rush hasn't really been as formidable as it's been in prior years. Right now, they're 61st in pass rushing grade at 70.4. The 2 years before that, they were 20th and 5th. So 61st right now. The defensive line is just not as good as they've been in the past at rushing the passer. Peter Woods is playing out of position right now at edge defender when we think he should be a defensive tackle, honestly. They've only pressured the quarterback on 29.3% of their dropbacks this year, 83rd in the country. Only one of their defensive linemen, TJ Parker, the edge defender, has a pass rushing grade above a 70 this year. It's really been a struggle for Clemson's pass rush. It's been kind of average, honestly. So if Shuck has time in the pocket, he should be able to find Louisville's really talented pass catchers like Ja'Cory Brooks and Chris Bell, not Colin Lacey anymore because he actually decided to redshirt the rest of the year. So they should still find other receivers, though. And right now, Louisville is 8th in receiving grade this year. Clemson's secondary is very strong. They're 35th in coverage grade, but they're going to need some help up front from their defensive line to just disrupt Tyler Shuck, his rhythm and his timing, or else it could be a difficult day for them to cover these receivers.
Yeah, I agree. I think we both agree that Shuck has been a lot better this year than maybe we thought. We thought quarterback would be the biggest question for Louisville coming into the season, and it actually has wound up being their defense. But Shuck has performed well, and you're right. If you don't disturb him, he's a veteran guy who's played a lot of football despite some injuries throughout his career. He's been better than I expected this year, and he's used his weapons well.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, in Clemson's hardest game since their Georgia loss in Week 1, will they pass it, or will Louisville pull off the upset?
I like Clemson in this game. Look, first of all, they very rarely lose home games. It's one of the hardest road environments to go play in, and I just think this Louisville secondary, it's been one of the more disappointing units in college football this year. And Klubnik, there's definitely improvement in Klubnik as a passer. I don't know. We'll see in some real tests here if he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country and things like that. I don't think we have him in that tier quite yet. We need to see it against the better teams. You know, if we got Louisville here, we got Virginia Tech coming up, we got maybe Miami in an ACC title game. These are some big games coming for
Pitt too.
They play Pitt too, who's got a really fun defense to watch. We're getting there next, but
South Carolina at the end of the year too.
There's some real tests coming here, and this is the first one. Although I think Louisville's secondary gives them enough chances to make throws down the field to guys like Antonio Williams and TJ Moore. I've got Clemson 34, Louisville 24. I think Louisville can put up points on this defense. Their offense, especially Ja'Cory Brooks, has been really good. I love Isaac Brown too, the young running back. He's been really good, but Clemson still has balance with Phil Maffa in the run game too. They get the ball downfield. I think Klubnik has another good day in this one against a struggling Louisville secondary.
All right, yeah, I got Clemson winning as well, and even a closer game though. I got 31-27. I think Kate Klubnik, Tyler Shuck, two of the most improved quarterbacks in the country. Like I said, I think the Tigers will win in a close one, but I think Louisville's going to put up a fight in this one. I don't think this is going to be an easy victory for Clemson at all, and I think Louisville covers the 11-point spread that they have right now. So Clemson winning 31-27. The last game we're talking about, another ACC game, is the only other ranked game that we have this week besides Penn State, Ohio State. Number 18 Pitt at number 20 SMU, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on ACC Network. These are two schools, Dawn, looking to stay alive in the ACC championship race right now. So a lot of people look at the ACC and say, oh, it's going to come down to Miami and Clemson. These two are still looming very large right now. Both Pitt and SMU, like Miami and Clemson, are undefeated in conference play so far this year. Pitt is undefeated overall with a perfect 7-0 record. The winner of this game firmly establishes himself as a top contender to win the conference alongside Miami and Clemson. The loser of this game is going to have a lot of trouble getting back into the title hunt for this conference. So massive game to really establish, okay, who will be the big three of the ACC, Miami, Clemson, and which one of these two schools?
No, absolutely. It's a huge matchup that I don't know that we anticipated. And I think for SMU it's very interesting because if they win this game, they've got at least something of a clear road possibly to maybe get to the conference title game or however the tiebreakers might work if we end up with some sort of scenario with Miami and Clemson there. But no, this is a massive game now because you're talking about Clemson, Miami, and these two teams as being really the four contenders to get into the ACC title game.
Absolutely. So, Don, you have the SMU offense who had a lot of difficulties against Duke last week. 6 turnovers. I believe the stat was it's only the second time out of 126 times where teams lost turnover battle by 6 and still won the game. SMU is one of 2 schools ever accomplished that. So what happened there, and what should we be looking out for when Kevin Jennings hit the ball?
So what happened there was Manny Diaz, even though he's a high blitzing type of coach, decided not to blitz Kevin Jennings because Jennings doesn't like throwing into standard coverages against standard rushes. He would rather break the pocket and do a lot of the things out of the pocket with his athleticism. But I think for me, SMU, they were bad last week. There's no question they got away with a win with 6 turnovers. Yeah. For me, I think the big story is actually this Pitt defense and what they did to Kyle McCord last week. I know you don't want me to bring it up, but
yeah, please don't.
But Pitt's defense kind of made Syracuse's offense do the same thing as SMU. The difference was they stayed in their wheelhouse and kept blitzing and kept running things the way that Pat Narduzzi's always run them. He's always run this kind of 4-match coverage and quarters coverage it's a weird version of it. So here's the 3 things that Pitt's defense does. Okay, let's get a reminder here, a crash course on Pat Narduzzi. Okay, they run quarters at the highest rate in the Power 5. Okay, normally you would think that, and you go, okay, it's cover 4, the sitting guy's back, and it's conservative, and we're just not trying to give up home runs. Not at all. He's daring you to take those shots. They have the highest press coverage rate in the entire country. All right? Over 93% of their plays, you will see some sort of press coverage. All right? And then the 14th highest pass blitz rate, even though you wouldn't think, okay, this is a team that runs a lot of quarters. They're not going to blitz a lot because they don't have the guys to do it. They do it anyway, right? It's always what's made Pat Narduzzi weird, right? When he was at Michigan State, now he's been at Pitt forever. And it throws off teams because it makes you take shots down the field quicker than you really want to, right? It's kind of this weird thing where you feel almost forced as a quarterback when you see one-on-ones outside or if you see blitzers coming and they just leave the seam sitting wide open, but you also don't have that much time to do it because you're talking about extra guys coming and he runs all sorts of twists and different things and guys might be coming off the slot and who knows. You're having to recognize first and foremost who's coming and where the space is, or you're just taking that gamble outside against a corner that's pressed. A lot of times on the weak side of the formation, it can be kind of a weird thing where it looks like zone to the strong side where there's more receiving threats, and then kind of one backside man. There's other teams that do this too. Tulane runs, actually, I don't know if they do it anymore without Willie Fritz there, but that's something that they would run down there the last couple of years. It's a weird defense that makes you kind of think a little more than usual. Now, if you can hit those shots and hit those explosives, you're going to be okay. So let's just compare this to what we have with Kevin Jennings, okay, in those three things. And you've got, against quarters, okay, a 66.8 passing grade, which is 12 points lower than he has against all other coverages, right? Kevin Jennings wants to make those big plays in the passing game. Sometimes those too high coverages like that don't allow you to do that, all right? Now, the blitz thing is interesting because he's still the fourth best passer in the country against the blitz, and Manny Diaz knew that last week, but he didn't blitz him.
Yep.
He decided not to. He said, we're going to sit standard, and we're going to make you make throws, and he didn't make the throws. He was thrown into tight windows, and it was a problem. So we'll see if Narduzzi now takes a page out of Diaz's book, and he's a little more conservative and makes Kevin Jennings throw the football. The third thing to me, I'm going to look out at SMU's weapons against press coverage. All right, that's a big thing this week. Only a 63.8 receiving grade against press coverage this year. And you're talking about an SMU team that doesn't have R.J. Maryland now, their tight end. I think he's the fastest tight end in college football.
Yeah, he'd be huge for those wide open seam routes.
He's the seam guy, and actually he was the highest graded guy when it came to beating press coverage. It's not a guy, I think more and more in this ACC race, it's not a guy that they could afford to lose. They've got to find some answers for Narduzzi's scheme and for the production they're losing with R.J. Maryland. You noticed it a little bit last week. I don't think it is a coincidence that they almost lost that game without R.J. Maryland. He was a big part of their offense, even though he's a tight end. He's honestly a receiver in that offense, and he was their best one. So I think there's a lot of dynamics here that Rhett Lashley has to figure out. First of all, he's got to calm down his quarterback after 6 turnovers last week, and then he's got to figure out how in the world he's beating Pat Narduzzi's defense and what the idea is going to be for that.
Yeah, that was an awesome breakdown of Pat Narduzzi's defense because it's like when you watch it, it's like this makes no damn sense, but it's working.
That's the point.
It's really interesting watching it. And honestly, Kyle McCord was in a blender a couple weeks ago as well.
And there were times with McCord where he even made some of the right throws vertically, or at least decided to, and just missed them because it was rushed, or he just couldn't find guys on the outside separating.
They weren't getting open.
Because it's not just the scheme, too. There's good players. There's good players out there, too. It's not like Pat Narduzzi doesn't have good players, but it's a weird scheme that really makes you, when you play Pitt that week, it makes you do some different things that maybe you're not used to.
Absolutely. If you can't separate either, that's a big thing too. Syracuse's receivers, they have some solid guys that in contested situations, but not a lot of great separators. If you can't separate against them, that's a big issue. And that's another thing too. I'm not going to try to make excuses for Kyle McCord, but they didn't get a lot of separation in that game either. So that's the key for SMU in this one. My matchup to watch when Pittsburgh has the ball is, can SMU force Eli Holstein to beat them? It might be Eli Holstein, by the way. We don't know. So head coach Pat Narduzzi said the team is in quote-unquote wait-and-see mode with Eli Holstein. He left the blowout win over Syracuse with an undisclosed injury. At first, so it looked like he got hit hard on the head, like his head hit the turf pretty hard. Pat Narduzzi said after the game, he got some dirt in his eye, and then we took him out after that. Then later on, he's like, it was more than just dirt in his eye. I don't know what the heck happened with Eli Holstein. Pat Narduzzi is very famous for being tight-lipped about injuries as well, so we'll never know probably what happened to Eli Holstein, which makes sense, right?
The only thing I can suspect is it looked like for a moment, there was a moment where he was waving his hand in front of his own face, like he couldn't see straight.
Yeah.
I have to assume if he hit his head on the turf, obviously, I have to think about it some sort of concussion type deal. But I get it. If they don't require you in college to release those things, and as a head coach, a lot of them don't do it.
And also it makes sense because he's like, listen, it's the guy's private health. Like, I'm not going to disclose that. Like, it's still a kid, right? It's still a student athlete. So I actually respect that. As a media member, you obviously want to know everything you can about these players, but also it makes sense that you don't want to disclose that kind of information. But regardless if he suits up or it's Nate Yarnell, and Pat Narduzzi even said in the press conference, Nate Yarnell will be taking first-team reps in practice. Now, again, there are a lot of the Pitt reporters like, well, what does that mean? Because Nate Yarnell always takes first-team reps in practice, even with Holstein there. So they're like, will we be taking more first-team reps or like the same amount? Like, Narduzzi's like, nope, not telling you that. Just he's taking first-team reps. Like, okay, well, now we learn nothing about this. So we don't know what's going to happen. Maybe Holstein plays, maybe he doesn't. Regardless of if he does or not, SMU still should focus on forcing Pitt to win with its passing attack. The Panthers right now, they are 23rd in EPA per pass, but Dalton, you broke this down in the Syracuse preview. A good amount of luck goes into that, right? Right now, Eli Holstein has a 56 passing grade. That's the 4th worst in the Power 4 and 133rd in the country. 14 turnover-worthy plays are also tied for the third most in the Power 4. He's only thrown 6 interceptions, so he's had a lot of turnover luck this year. Pittsburgh's offensive line has had some issues protecting him as well. They have a lot of pressure on nearly 33%, nearly 1/3 of their dropbacks. That's 90th in the country. And Holstein struggles under pressure. 42.8 passing grade under pressure. Obviously, it's not a very good mark at all. SMU has the second best pressure rate in the country at 42.4%. Only Miami has a higher pressure rate than SMU. And we already talked about how elite Miami's defensive line is. So if the Mustangs are able to dominate the Panthers' struggling offensive line, stop the run game, and force Eli Holstein to beat them through the air, and his turnover luck runs out, that could spell trouble for Pitt. So it's going to be interesting to see. Now, we don't know if Holstein will be the quarterback or will be Nate Yarnell, but regardless, I think the key for SMU in this game is to get after the quarterback, stop the run, and make them beat you through the air.
You know, and that point you made about the pass rush, isn't that ironic, too, that you've got Miami transfer Elijah Roberts at the head of that?
Dude, can you imagine if he's still there? Oh, my God.
I don't even know when he would play with all the guys they have there, which is probably why he went to SMU, but that's a really talented guy. You know, I love watching him, but SMU's, they've been getting it done up front. It's going to be a big mystery leading into this game. And look, I think Nate Yarnell is capable, especially if Pitt can get the run game going and get in the play action. I really liked how he worked in play action last year, but it's definitely a thing where, you know, sometimes you're good, sometimes you're lucky, sometimes a little bit of both. And I think offensively, they're doing just enough. Last week was different because they got all the turnovers and 3 pick sixes.
They didn't need to throw the ball at all.
Their defense darn near outscored their offense, or they might have. I forget what the final score was, but I mean, you're just talking about a team that they're playing complementary football. But yeah, SMU, this is a different challenge than they've had, I think, in the last couple of weeks. This is a good defense as well as what can be an explosive offense. So this is going to be a fun game.
Absolutely. So, Dalton, ultimately, who will join Miami and Clemson at the top of the ACC, and will Pitt continue his undefeated season, or will SMU pull off another win?
I think this is a weird game because Pat Narduzzi can absolutely coach this team and this defense to a win. I'm curious to see what Rhett Lashley has on offense for this, and if they're going to go with explosive plays early, or if it's going to be a little bit more like last week where their best plays, a lot of them really came from Brashard Smith in their run game, right? Brashard Smith's had a great year. I think what sticks out to me is SMU last week played the worst game they could have possibly played, right? You mentioned that only second win ever with a -6 turnover margin. But they won the game.
Yep.
And they got away with a tough road win against a really good defense, a defense that is at least as good and maybe even better than this Pitt defense. Now they get to go home and go, okay, we can't possibly be that bad again. I think it's a close game. I think there's some fun things here with Pitt's defense. I'm going to take SMU 31-27. I just don't think SMU's not – I mean, they can't do that like they did again last week, right? Obviously, they should have lost with the way that they played, but I think this SMU team is really good. I think they're going to figure some things out. I'm just curious what the plan is in the passing game, again, without R.J. Maryland for the rest of the season, and just how Kevin Jennings responds to what was by far his worst game of the year, because the way things have gone for SMU, too, there was a point late in last week's game I was like, we're going to see Preston Stone tonight, aren't we? We're going to go right back to it, and we're going to be back and forth with this again. But no, I think he's going to he's going to give Jennings a chance to rebound. I think he rebounds well enough to win this game, 31-27.
Yeah, I've never seen a coach, after winning a thrilling game, be more defeated in a post-game interview than Rhett Lashley.
Oh, yeah.
He was like, I don't know how we won that game. We did not deserve to win that game.
He knows they got away with it.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, that was a really funny post-game interview. I also got SMU winning this one 20-20. I think, like I said, being at home is huge. They can settle down. They're in their own homes now. They're in their own dorms and apartments and in their own facilities for the week. They don't have to worry about traveling again. I think that would be big, and I just think Holstein and the Panthers, it's a banged-up Holstein. We don't know if he's going to be playing or not. Also, this is probably the best defense they played all season. Pittsburgh has so far. I think Pitt will suffer their first loss of the season. And you mentioned it, Dalton. With a relatively easy remaining schedule, SMU has a great chance of winning out and going to Charlotte for the ACC title game. Now, I don't know how the tiebreakers work out if Clemson and Miami both also win out, because Clemson and Miami don't play each other, by the way. So all three of them could win out and be undefeated in conference play. And I I don't know what happens then. I'll admit I don't know what happens with tiebreakers. I think it's like record against common opponents or something like that.
There's a similar scenario that in theory could happen in the Big Ten too. We could see some real chaos with all of that. But no, you're right. None of the three play each other. But SMU, look, you take care of the business in front of you. That's kind of the weird part about having these bigger conferences now. So it starts this week for SMU, and there is a road. There is a road to what they would be 11-1 at that point, right? Yeah, they only lost to BYU, so we'll see where it goes. They got some tough games in front of them, but it should be fun to watch.
It should absolutely be fun to watch. But I got SMU winning this one 28-20. All right, Dom, before we go, we got to go over our upset picks of the week. Let's update the standings on our upset picks right now. I am once again in last place because I suck. I have 326 points right now. You have 362 points after a BS BYU upset call over UCF. I don't know how on earth BYU is underdogs to UCF, and clearly they won that game handedly. So it makes sense, and Eli is just dominating. He's lapping us right now. Mike quite literally is lapping me, I think, or very close to lapping me.
Close to it, yeah.
Yeah, at 648 points. Just so people are wondering, what is the point total? How do you come up with that? We're picking upsets outside of the games that we preview, and whatever their money line is, if they win, you get that as your money line. So if you get it as your point total. So theoretically, if you pick a plus 200 dog and they win, you get 200 points added onto your point total. So that's why Eli is doing so well right now. Let's go over to our producer Eli with his upset pick of the week. And Eli, what are you going to do and how are you going to build a bigger lead over us?
Well, it's just kind of we're playing the hits today. A little bit ballsier of a pick than I have been. I feel like I've been going pretty low with my my totals. Dalton, you guys will see, got the one that I think everybody kind of wanted today. But give me Arizona. I'll take Arizona over UCF at plus 180. Kind of juicy. As we know, we were pretty high on Arizona going into the year as a show. So already lost some money on them, so why not let them hurt me again?
Two questions. Is that game, or one question I should say, is that game at Arizona?
No, at UCF.
Ew, and it's cross country. Yeah, that's gutsy. That's real gutsy going cross.
I mean,
some of us don't get the easy pick of picking first and getting Vanderbilt. So,
well, we'll get there. The other thing too, noteworthy: Gus Malzahn fired as defensive coordinator. I think I saw.
Yeah, he did do that.
Trying to figure out what's going on there on defense and get it right. Certainly,
covering Tedder McMillan is no easy task.
It certainly isn't.
I'm worried about Arizona's run D against RJ Harvey, though. I am a little concerned.
That's a problem, Eli. I will. That's a brave pick.
But you got it. No, it's brave. No, Eli is picking all the. You and I have been trying to go, with some off the wall picks, and Eli's just chugging along, picking the plus 105, plus 110, just building the point total. Well, you and I are We're Aaron Judge, dude. We're swinging for home. Or I'm Aaron Judge at least. I'm swinging for home runs every pitch. I'm striking out every single time. But if I hit them, then it's a big point total.
That makes me so happy as a Met fan. Anyway, you know what's funny is he has that, and that's a gutsy pick. You want me to go next?
I'm actually pissed.
And somehow I get a pick like this with longer odds than that at plus 195. BS. I was scrolling through our DraftKings board, right, and going through, okay, what's the underdog? And I had to do a double take. Auburn is a 6.5 point favorite over Vanderbilt.
How?
I don't.
How?
I don't know. Is there something we don't know? Is there some sort of doubt? Nothing's wrong with Diego?
I literally looked up Diego Pavia injury, thinking he's got to be hurt.
I know he turned his ankle last week and he was playing through it. But
no, he's playing.
Of course he is. Yeah. Diego Pavia. We don't doubt whether Diego Pavia is playing. No, give me Vanderbilt straight up at Auburn. And the funniest part of this to me, Pavia and Eli Stowers and Jerry Kill last year at New Mexico State. They already went into Auburn and won once. They did it last year at New Mexico State. So not to rub it in, Zach Tantello, but I think you have a thing here where I don't know either. I got to be honest. I know Jarquez Hunter's been raging hot for Auburn, even though the team's
and Vanderbilt's run D's been
right. But I think even in a loss to Texas last week, like they didn't play a bad football.
They lost by 3.
They lost by 3 points, right?
And beat Alabama.
It's still Diego Pavia. It's still Eli Stowers. It's still and Vandy. Look, they're trying to get bowl eligible.
Right.
They have 5 wins. This might be their best shot at a win because they got some tough games coming down the stretch. But give me Diego Pavia. Are you kidding me? That's absolutely.
Again, like I was so pissed last week when you picked BYU over UCF, saying that was the biggest BS spread of the year. This is a close second, man. I have no earthly idea how Vanderbilt is a touchdown underdog.
Just no respect.
If they were 1 point underdogs, if it was like a plus 100, I would be like, I'm all over that. I'm taking that. They're plus 190. I don't understand. I'm sorry, Zach Tantilla. I'm very sorry, but that's the dumbest spread of the week. I don't understand that at all, in my opinion. But I'm going with mine. That is Wisconsin plus 130 over Iowa. I think Wisconsin. We had a lot of Penn State fans in the comments of our review when I said, it was a closer game than people think. And they're like, no, it wasn't. Penn State dominated that game. No, they really didn't. Like, Wisconsin was in that game until, like, the second half where it really...
There was, like, 20 minutes where Penn State dominated.
Yeah, exactly.
They were down at halftime.
I think Wisconsin's a pretty good team. I think they're a top 30 team in the country. And also, Dalton, Cade McNamara is not the starting quarterback for them anymore. He got hurt. And Brendan Sullivan will be the starting quarterback, the former Northwestern quarterback, who's been okay, right? But I think that's a big advantage for Wisconsin with their elite secondary as well. So give me the Badgers plus 130 over Iowa, who's on a backup quarterback right now. I think
that game is going to be ugly.
It's going to be ugly, hideous game. 10-7 probably final score.
9-8. Yeah, it's going to be some sort of maybe just safeties.
Whatever defense scores a touchdown will win the game. Honestly.
Yeah, that might be it. Or maybe Caleb Johnson just pops one off and that's it. But
I'm a little worried about.
That game's going to be that's Big Ten West all day.
Yep.
I know we don't have divisions anymore, but that's going to look like last year for sure.
Absolutely. So I got Wisconsin over Iowa. All right, that wraps up our Week 10 preview show. We got some more videos coming out at the very end of the week as well, so make sure you guys stay tuned for that. And then also on Sunday morning, our Week 10 review show, going over a lot of these games and maybe some other ones as some major results happened in college football, is Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Make sure you guys tune in for that for our Week 10 review show. For producer Ty, producer Eli back there, for Dalton Wasserman, I'm Max Chadwick. We'll see you guys very, very soon.